Good evening, campers, dreamers, and babysitters. I'm Luke Janesco, and welcome back to the channel. Thanks to everyone who is already subscribed here, but we are getting so close to that 50K, so if you're new and like what we do here on Splattercast, please consider subscribing. And of course, I want to give a special thank you to our Patreon subscribers as well. But jumping back into some disturbing content for you bloodthirsty bastards with some French films that will just, well, kick you right in the nuts. But don't worry, ladies, you aren't escaping this one either.
You mean like this?
Yikes. Well, we're in for some fun here, guys, so let's see what films turned my beanbag into a speed bag. Taking the number 5 spot, I Stand Alone. A horse butcher's life and mind begin to break down as he lashes out against various factions of society while attempting to reconnect with his estranged daughter. This one is a purely mentally exhausting film. It really burrows into your brain while you're watching these events unfold and really puts you through so many demented introspective moments. The story opens and throws a lot at you all at once, laying the groundwork for this butcher's troubled past right out of the gate, and you feel this hopelessness that just gets worse throughout the film. Mentioning he has a daughter, and when I saw this line pop up, I knew I was in trouble.
It was at this moment that he knew. He fucked up.
We spend a lot of time in the head of the main character, simply called the Butcher, as he readjusts to life, relocating with his bitch girlfriend. Those are his words, not mine. Being so in the head of this guy is constantly a place that made me feel uncomfortable throughout the entire film. The stream of consciousness of the Butcher never stops, from random people on the street or his philosophy on life. These are completely unrestricted thoughts that just get real dark and depressing. Philippe Noun, who plays the Butcher, has this unsettling quality about him. Even when he's not saying anything, you're still on edge. Maybe because of how introspective the film is, his presence makes you feel like he's just gonna punch you in the face and not even say a word to you. While the Butcher has these thoughts, he never really acts on them for the duration, at least for the beginning of the film, and then we get to a turning point where he really does unleash his anger on his pregnant girlfriend when he treats her stomach like a slab of meat in a Rocky movie. Hearing the Butcher's constant thoughts about violence, you're waiting for something physical to happen, and it's a perfect buildup of tension, but good lord, I didn't think it was gonna unfold this way. Being a father myself and going on that 9-month journey, I remember being so cautious about my wife falling or just bumping her stomach in general. So this scene made me squirm quite a bit. You really have that thought of, okay, I really need this scene to end. And it seems to go on for quite a bit of time, or at least an eternity as you're watching it. It might not be that long, but when you're certainly watching it, you feel like you're sitting in the scene for quite a bit of time. After leaving his apartment, the Butcher just kind of wanders around with an inner monologue about when you have no money and nothing to offer, no one has any interest in helping your situation. Seeing his past friends disregard his plea for any sort of help, and seeing this older guy on the street with no prospects of aid gives this film such a bleak atmosphere. So mentally you're already in that state, and then even through the scenery Gaspar Noé captures of the landscape, it really gives this heaviness to the film. I don't find the Butcher to have any really redeeming qualities as a person, but the narrative and issues are presented in such an authentic way. It gets your brain drawing parallels to real people who have to deal with similar issues, which amps up the bleak nature of the film. Bringing that reality through his writing, I have to give Gaspar Noé a lot of praise, even if it did ruin my day watching this. This film was released in 1998, but really shows how so many films with a social commentary can still maintain their relevance, in this case even almost 30 years later. The disdain the Butcher has for the upper class and a struggle with joblessness and not even feeling any level of usefulness, giving us this looming cloud of melancholy which will linger with you even after you watch the film. While this film is a tough watch because of that introspective element, the last 17 minutes turn into complete mayhem when the butcher picks up his mute daughter from an asylum where she's a patient. As he plans the death of both himself and his daughter, that weird relationship and urges he had for his daughter at the very beginning of the film come front and center here. I Stand Alone evokes this depressing tone and leaves you with this sense of sleaziness even after you view the film. Carving its way into the number 4 spot on this list, In My Skin. A woman grows increasingly fascinated with her body after suffering a disfiguring accident. This one hits a little bit different than most of the stories because of how seemingly normal our main character Esther is compared to every other instance on this list. Esther has a pretty normal social life and is very successful professionally, even getting a promotion during the course of the film that will eventually lead to her spiral, but coming into the film, her mundane life is so relatable, making her case that much more disturbing. When Esther is at a party, she accidentally cuts her leg on a piece of metal when walking outside, which is our catalyst to what becomes her obsession with disfiguring her own body, which again is another very mundane incident when it comes to these types of extreme films. Seeing Esther try to balance a lot of success and everyday interactions with this new obsession of disfiguring herself as it just gets worse and worse creates a different kind of terror in this film. One of the interactions in the film that gives us a little more insight into the mind of Esther is when she is at work, seemingly pretty busy, but then gets this urge to cut her own leg with a random metal object. They keep the scene pretty brief with the less is more approach, which amps up the imagery we see later on as this really goes off the rails. But what is interesting is Esther's interaction afterward. Discussing work with her friend Sandrine, Esther casually and almost joyfully mentioned she was cutting herself just moments earlier. The eagerness in her demeanor to tell Sandrine is really off-putting to us as a viewer, but also to her friend as well. Seeing that Sandrine is more than a little disturbed, Esther glosses over the rest of the conversation, trying to focus back onto work. Esther mentions the urge arose without even her thinking when Sandrine brings it up again a little bit later, but the coldness from Esther toward the situation gives you concern, but is also just downright chilling. Director Marina Devon, who also stars in the film as Esther, spoke about her decision to portray the character, saying she wanted to represent someone who is very sweet and in a state of grace rather than someone who's showing hatred for themselves. The difference in mental approach for the Esther character is why I think this hits a little bit different than a lot of other films that do tackle the subject matter in some sort of form. The discussion around the film becomes about control. What Esther inflicts on herself is really the only thing she is able to control. Her job and relationships are all elements in her life she can't really navigate successfully. Another great scene in the film is when Esther's at dinner with a bunch of work colleagues and she finds her arm unattached from her body. It is an extremely jarring scene when you see it for the very first time, but adds in this layer of psychological commentary I find quite enamoring. While the dinner conversation is only about work, the pacing and quick cuts make you feel this overwhelming feeling that Esther has as well. Midway through this scene, Esther actually has to excuse herself from dinner as we go on to watch her bite her own arm to feel some sense of control before being interrupted. Being able to convey that overwhelmed feeling Esther has to the audience, then showing us this uncomfortable scene of her inflicting more punishment on herself in the scene that is very slow and all you hear is the room noise and her chewing on her arm. Honestly, listening to that sound made me want to dry heave a little bit. In My Skin is a bit of a taster's choice when it comes to disturbing elements, whether you prefer the less is more or just more so of an audio approach, but when it does come to the more actual gross out gore scenes, Marina Devon makes sure she delivers with this very stylistic split screen delivery, only seeing some close-up shots with gore and then seeing Esther in this room in full screen feels so mentally exhausting. It's so methodical, gross, sweaty even. You feel like you can actually smell the room when you're watching it. Really everything that you need in a scene that makes you want to go shower afterward, but psychologically and physically physically, this one is certainly going to deliver. Getting us all hot and bothered in the number 3 spot, BAISE Moi. 2 young women marginalized by society go on a destructive tour of sex and violence. So this is basically a French Thelma and Louise, but with way more killing and way more penises, but none are the caliber of Brad Pitt.
Yeah, you got an amazing story to tell your friends. If not, well, you got a tag on your toe.
I just want to put this up front here, just as a bit of a trigger warning for anyone who might want to check this film out. There is some pretty graphic scenes of SA in this film, which happens about probably within the first 10 minutes. And the actresses in the film do come from an adult background, and some of this is, well, a lot of this is actually unsimulated. So it does get pretty graphic, and they certainly do not go with the less is more approach. So just be warned before you dive into this one. BAISE Moi has a really low budget quality to it. It kind of almost has that August Underground feel in a way, although it's not as graphic and not any sort of found footage, but that low budget quality does add a lot to the realism of the storytelling. The narrative is pretty jumbled because we aren't really getting a consistent tone in the film. It isn't interested in building tension. It really is just about these 2 women going on a rampage of sorts. To kind of give you an idea of how much this film can jump from one scene to the next without really building any sort of tension or having a consistent tone to it, the film does go from Manu and Nadine dancing in their hotel room in their underwear to blowing a woman's head off moments later as they commit a robbery at an ATM. So we really aren't concerned about getting the viewer comfortable in their seats to take them on this kind of journey. It just really kind of keeps you wondering what's going to happen next. As we get into some of these jaw-dropping scenes, while it could be hard for some viewers to really get into a groove with this film because of how thrown together some of the scenes feel at times, it gives it that extra layer of realism, making us feel like we are really watching this rampage unfold. The grittiness of the film is what really sells a lot of the scenes here. Since this is low budget, they feel constructed in a low budget way, if that makes sense. But the way that they do play out, it's really just kind of coated in sex and ultra violence. And the story itself just presents these 2 women on this journey for revenge against society. As you get deeper into the film, you really feel like you're part of Manu and Nadine's exploits, waiting to see how this visceral experience is going to unfold because you know it's not heading anywhere positive. I didn't expect for the relationship between the 2 lead characters to make me feel as invested as I did, but the friendship between Manu and Nadine has this authentic feel without ever really feeling forced. I really like that we don't get these overly emotional scenes between our 2 characters. We get little tidbits of each character's past without really lingering on anything. You get this feel that they have come to terms that they've been dealt a shitty hand for so long and are going to make everyone who crosses their path pay in the most gruesome ways possible. There is this sort of liberation when you're watching the film. There's such a sense of nihilism that makes you guess the outcome of each scenario Manu and Nadine find themselves in. With this film being so sexually charged, so many of the scenes end in death or a different kind of climax entirely.
Things go well, I might be showing her my O face. Oh.
It really feels like a game of Russian roulette on what Manu and Nadine will do next. And I think that's why this film resonated with me in the way that it did. It's certainly not as rewatchable as some of the films. And like I said, while not as gruesome as August Underground, I think it's going to hit you in a similar fashion that film does. Bringing home that silver medal? Possession. A woman starts exhibiting increasingly disturbing behavior after asking her husband for a divorce. Suspicions of infidelity soon give way to something much more sinister. If you were to look up mindfuckery filmmaking in the dictionary, Possession is where you would be directed. This was my first watch for this list, and to be honest, I've owned this film on Blu-ray for about 4 years. Dylan was the one who really pushed me to watch this one recently, so I popped this one into the Blu-ray player, and I gotta be honest, I absolutely love this film. While this isn't solely a pure French film, it hits so hard on a level I wasn't expecting. I just had to find some sort of justification to put it on this list. Not knowing anything about this film other than it was starring Sam Neill and the title, my assumption was that I was dealing with something supernatural. I was honestly expecting some sort of ghost story like The Entity, but good lord, was I wrong. The relationship between Mark and Anna felt so batshit insane for at least 98% of this film. It just put me in a chokehold and I couldn't get enough of every scene these two were going back and forth. We are never given a moment of feeling at ease with this couple. From the very start, Mark is standing there with his suitcase as this relationship just falls apart more and more. Using the relationship angle can get a little redundant depending on how it could be presented, but the way Andrei Zulawski is able to up the ante each time just takes the audience deeper down this rabbit hole of chaos. Within the first 10 minutes of the film, we get this restaurant scene as Mark plans to break everything off with Anna, but instead it turns into complete mayhem when Mark starts to destroy dishes and chase Anna around. Before we even got deeper into the story, for some reason this scene just grabbed my attention. From the way it's composed, having the characters sitting almost back to back, and the delivery of the conversation, it always feels like we're watching water begin to bubble over a pot every time these two meet on screen. Truly having one of the most jarring scenes I've seen in a long time, the unveiling of this slimy, Lovecraftian monster was not what I was expecting when we were unraveling this mystery of Anna's other life, but I am so glad that this is where the story went. Building the tension with this private investigator snooping around and Anna trying to distract him, it really put me on edge as to what we were going to find out. And in that shot of the PI going into the bathroom and seeing this thing in the corner that looks like a sentient slab of barbecue ribs just staring back at him, it really took my brain a moment to catch up to what I was seeing.
I want my baby back, baby back, baby back. I want my baby back, baby back, baby back. I want my baby back rib.
Each time this thing pops back up on screen in some form, whether he's this slimy tentacle monster that's laying on the bed or this thing that remarkably looks like Rocky Dennis.
How much for a basic?
25.
Is that it?
It has the same emotional response. The way that it's shot and kind of evolves throughout is on par with the storytelling of the Anna and Mark relationship. Every dynamic is so well constructed that it just leaves you wanting to see more. The last thing I'll say about this film is that the performances are just on another level entirely. The emotional weight of the scenes and how off the wall some of the dynamics seem, but somehow authentic in a way, just gave me such a wild emotional experience. Isabelle Adjani is just an absolute powerhouse of an actor. She steals so many scenes with her portrayal of Anna. Everyone will talk about that subway scene, and rightfully so. It is completely compelling and inspirational for a lot of filmmakers, but there are so many scenes where she really says nothing but gives this range of emotion most actors can't even express verbally. Sam Neill and how erratic his performance is really makes you feel tense every time he's on screen. We get so many different versions of Mark, it seems like, in every different scene. One minute he's compassionate, begging Anna to stay with him, or he's taking care of Bob, or the next time he's rocking like a madman in a chair like he's gonna go off the rails at any moment. I've only seen this one twice now, and am so eager to revisit it so I can really unpack and dissect everything a little bit deeper, but with its range of emotion, erratic performances, and some slimy monster cucking Sam Neill, this one is an absolute must-watch. Capturing that #1 spot, Frontiers. A gang of young thieves flee Paris during the violent aftermath of a political election, only to hold up at an inn run by neo-Nazis. When I decided to look into some extreme French films, I had this blueprint of how that film would go, and Frontiers is exactly what I pictured. From its fast pace to its blatant brutality, this one will give you nearly a 2-hour fear boner. So the film starts off illustrating the civil unrest that is happening in the country, which turned out to be a little more relatable than I would have liked. But this political theme is kind of the backdrop of the film that we can draw parallels to as we get deeper into the guts and gore. Our group of characters find themselves at this sort of hostel that is run by this weirdo family, and the first red flag for me was this guy in the dirty tank top right here. When you're that sweaty and you're just sitting down I know you got some secrets in your closet. As soon as we get to the hostel, you can immediately feel the tension in the air with how awkward the family acts when our group of characters just walk inside. This really did make me think of the film Green Room, and not just because of the neo-Nazi element. It's got that dingy, dark vibe that is very similar to Green Room, where you have this tension in the air and you're just waiting for these events to unfold. Both films are able to harness this unimaginable tension in their respective setting, even before we get into any of the gory bits. And I have to give it up to our boy in that dingy tank top Getz, who's played by Samuel Lebihan, for really amping up the intensity as the film gets going. After all hell breaks loose, there is this wonderfully intense scene with Getz pursuing another character in a car. The way that scene's cut, the pacing to it, and how it's acted really makes you feel that horror rather than it becoming too action-packed. When we are introduced to the rest of the demented family that runs the hostel, they have this reserved nature about them, which is terrifying, but Getz legitimately feels like he wants to rip everyone's head off in every scene. On my first watch of Frontiers, the scene where our two characters, Tom and Farid, are still being pursued but injured after that car crash is just downright terrifying. It is honestly this perfect mix of horror right in the middle of the film. They wedge themselves in this tightly enclosed tunnel, and the way that it's shot gives you all kinds of claustrophobia. Watching the scene unfold, I'm already on the verge of hyperventilating for these two characters, and then when Farid turns his camera to see this little fucker, that was legitimately an oh shit moment. Then, of course, Tom gets his shit rocked to remind us of that other threat. I don't usually audibly react to a lot of horror, but this sequence here got me with its pure tension and violence. Well done, Xavier.
Well, that's awful kind of you. How about you give me a standing ovation?
When our other characters finally get to the hostel and the family captures them, that's when the real sense of hopelessness starts to set in with this film. We also have this theme of racial purity, and while this film has tons of moments of unnerving physicality, the conversation between Carl and Von Geisler will freak you out when they are discussing their plans for Yasmin. Hearing them describe Yasmin and dropping the line, "We need to renew the family's blood," gives you all the details you need to know the stakes of the situation. The film can evoke this disgusting atmosphere that can make you emotionally exhausted as it works to the scenes of hyper-violence, which is a perfect recipe for films like this, Martyrs, and High Tension. Some of our characters are chained up with pigs. Having blood from their wounds mixed with pig duty calls for a mandatory shower after watching this.
Stop looking at me, Swan!
The last piece of this film I'll bring up is the use of this kind of meat locker where the family's victims are stored. It is used so well to build tension throughout the film, but also gives us this dread we need to really fear this family. The way that device is used, and then mixing it with action gore and that hopelessness we get that I talked about earlier, makes this such a brutal viewing. Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. I guarantee at least a few of these films will make you gag, especially if they are your first watch. I know a couple were mine, and certainly we've got some haunting imagery that I will be seeing in my nightmares for the weeks to come. But it was worth it. I think some of these were rather interesting in terms of their storytelling, their character development, which did surprise me. It's always a welcome surprise when you get something with some great story to it, and it's just not guts and gore, which we certainly have an abundance of that in here as well. So this list for me was rather intriguing. I hope you found it intriguing as well. And you stick right here with Splattercast. We have so much content coming your way with some more reviews. We got a lot of screeners on deck that we're going to be releasing here in the next few weeks. And of course, our bread and butter. We've always got these disturbing lists coming out, or just some lists that are horror related that were topical or interested us at the time. So keep it right here on Splattercast, but until next time, I'm Luke Janesco, and stay scared.
Do the horror shit, gonna do it live, 'cause Splattercast kick it every day they live. Splattercast, gonna slash your ass. 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 Splattercast, gonna slash your ass.